Mr. Speaker, it is not often that there is a lengthy debate on the statement from Her Excellency. I'm grateful that the members opposite have accepted the justification for the state of emergency. Now, questions which have to do with a crime plan and so on may be relevant for another day, but Her Excellency was clear in stating what the state of emergency here was. It was an existential threat to the safety of the state, led by intelligence dealing with certain actors within the maximum security prison. That is it. We took action, we avoided the worst case scenario. And that is essentially what that part of this evening's proceedings were to be about. Now, if I could just speak to a couple things which were raised by the member for Arima. The member for Arima referred to an article in the Express, all that and the need to have some sort of public information. Trinidad and Tobago is a small country. My remarks this afternoon have been vetted by the Commissioner of Police. And they've been vetted by the Commissioner of Police because the police get intelligence from various sources. And you can imagine some of those sources who might be affected by things that I might say. I don't want that. I don't have control over the press, but the report was factually, largely speaking, correct. And the threat is a very real threat, as the journalists identified. Now, what I would like to do, Mr. Speaker, is to move us on to the second motion. So with those words, I would like to move, but on the second motion, I'd like to encourage my colleagues opposite to support us having supported us on the justification for the existence of the state of emergency. We would make the case and ask our colleagues opposite to support us on the extension of the state of emergency, which comes in a minute or two. I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is, be it resolved that the House take note of the statement by the President under Section 9, subsection 1 of the Constitution, setting out the specific grounds on which the decision to declare the existence of a state of public emergency was based. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is enacted by Section 8, subsection 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, that the President may from time to time make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists. And whereas the President has, by proclamation, made on the 18th day of July 2025, declared that a state of public emergency exists in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And whereas it is enacted by Section 9, subsection 2 of the Constitution, that a proclamation made by the President for the purposes of and in accordance with Section 8 shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 15 days. And whereas it is enacted by Section 10(1) of the Constitution, that before its expiration, the proclamation may be extended from time to time by resolution, supported by a simple majority vote of the House of Representatives. So, however, that no extension exceeds 3 months, and the extensions do not in the aggregate exceed 6 months. And whereas it is necessary and expedient that the proclamation made by the President on the 18th day of July 2025, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, should be extended for a further period not exceeding 3 months. Now therefore be it resolved that the proclamation made by the President on the 18th day of July 2025, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, be extended for a further period of 3 months. Mr. Speaker, and this is a point that was not alluded to but spoken of by the member for Arima. 35 years ago, almost to this day, the government of Trinidad and Tobago was overthrown in this very chamber. By this time, perhaps, then Prime Minister Robinson, Minister of National Security Selwyn Richardson, were tied together face down and both shot in the legs. Another member of Parliament, Leo Devines, was also shot and, as we all know, later succumbed to his injuries. I begin with this reminder because, as life would have it, we are here today to do exactly that business that Parliament was then called upon. Of course, Parliament was housed in the Central Bank because of the extensive destruction to this chamber and the other one caused by those actions. So we are here to do the very business that Parliament, then housed in the Central Bank, was called to do almost exactly 35 years ago. Now, the very rich irony is that I am here to address this House and the country in circumstances not dissimilar from those at that time. One difference, and a terrifying one at that, is that today there is no singular violent threat. But I want to be abundantly clear. If we did not take the decisive action of declaring a state of emergency and immediately removing individuals, I will not describe them as gang leaders as yet, from the maximum security prison 10 days ago, along with the many subsequent operations which I can confirm have in fact taken place, and this is where the debate becomes something else other than the President's statement. There have been subsequent operations by the police and armed forces, some of which have been publicized, some of which have not been publicized. Many of us may not have been here today. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the services, the police service, the army, and the prisons particularly for the actions that they took on the 18th of July, beginning on the 18th of July, and continuing thereafter, to secure all of us in this chamber and to secure the people of Trinidad and Tobago. There are those on the opposite side and in the public who have sought to vilify the government for declaring this state of emergency and to insinuate that the reports of widespread imminent danger were fabricated or exaggerated. In the interest of safeguarding the integrity of ongoing investigations and maintaining sensitive information, we cannot place all the facts on public record without endangering lives. The truth is, we cannot blame the population for having doubts. The citizens of this country were, after all, subjected to lie after lie for 10 years under the past leadership of those opposite. We were fed the most foolish untruths to cover ineptitude, corruption, abuse of power, and mismanagement across the board. Mr. Speaker, the population must be jaded. It must have doubts. Why? Well, because, in no small part, because the very last state of emergency, which was declared by a prime minister, and I'm not going back into ancient history 15 and 20 years ago. The very last state of emergency that was declared by a prime minister, who had a glass in his hand while at a party in Tobago. One of my colleagues, I do not wish to steal his thunder, but I would just encourage my colleagues on the other side to speak and tread very gently in defending that particular individual, because one of my colleagues who is to speak has irrefutable evidence that this took place. A man with a glass in his hand at a party declares a state of emergency. How do you expect the population to treat with all of this? All I can do here today, Mr. Speaker, is to remind citizens that a mere 3 months ago, you voted for this Prime Minister because she represented change, she represented maturity, she represented compassion, and something else, courage. I was sitting in the room when the report was made by the Commissioner of Police. And the Prime Minister did not hesitate to accept the recommendation of the Commissioner of Police. Obviously, there was a discussion on citizens' rights, but the trigger was pulled right then, right there, within a minute of the report of the special branch having been obtained. In the last 90 days, we have frontally attacked many of the institutions of corruption that we inherited. A state of emergency cannot ever be the entirety of a crime plan. And that is where my colleague, the representative, the member for Arima, either misconstrued the statement of the president, which had nothing to do with, well, very little. She did recite crime, but she spoke about the existential threat to the security of the state. This is not a crime plan. We do not say that it is a crime plan. It is an urgent, necessary measure to give law enforcement the powers they need to dismantle a criminal enterprise that threatens the security of the state. Now, that enterprise was determined to assassinate persons in critical positions in this country. We have shared some of that information and some of that intelligence with those individuals. We have not made them public for obvious reasons. The plan was to attack buildings, to generally hobble the justice system. One prosecutor, a prominent police prosecutor, but representative of the Director of Public Prosecutions, was shot and killed during the last state of emergency, the one which was declared by the gentleman with the beverage in hand. Prosecutor was killed. What does that, why is that relevant? Because all of the other prosecutors are affected. I didn't want to say nervous, but they are affected. I have been asked to authorize grief counseling and all manner of things for those persons. These are human beings. They lost one of their own during that state of emergency, which was declared by the leadership of those on the other side. Now, another objective, apart from hobbling the justice system, to intimidate law enforcement, taking out police officers, those in the prisons who were not already scared, some of them were targeted, and to throw Trinidad and Tobago into the type of chaos, the likes of which, even after you take into account what took place here in 1990, we have never seen. Now, if I can speak briefly on the evolution of terrorism and criminal networks. Terrorism and insurgents have evolved significantly over the last 35 years. The Jamaat in 1990 used maxi taxis and the assorted van to go to the places that they took control of. The airport, for a brief period of time, an attempt was made there. To TTT, a successful attempt was made there on Marval Road. To this place, this is where the seat of government was overthrown. And of course, the police headquarters, where they drove a van in, they shot the guard at the headquarters, ran over his body, drove into the building, exploded, planted a bomb, exploded the building, and the old police headquarters is no more. Things are very different in 2025. The groups outside of prison who take instructions from their leaders in the main, who are inside of the prison, are armed to the teeth. They possess explosives. I'm not going off record here. There have been reports in the press as to C4 explosives being found outside of the prison. I think the member for Tunapuna led the operation that seized C4 from the garden to the prison. That would have been when you all were in office, unfortunately. So, again, that's on you. But I want us to try to not politicize what we're doing here today, because the facts are that the gangs are united. The gangs are united to do things. And if the gangs are united, then perhaps it may be prudent for us to think of having a united front. That is all that I see. In the recent past, a lot has been asked of what do we intend to do. We have given the police service in the last 10 days essentially everything that was required of them in terms of resources. And they have responded both in terms of morale, which is difficult to quantify, but also in terms of their enthusiasm, in terms of the operations that they have conducted, and in terms of the professionalism that they have displayed with courage and with efficiency that we have not seen in years. Today, our republic faces an unprecedented convergence of organized criminal forces that threaten not just our public safety, but the very foundations of the democracy. Just as we have been forced to do when attacked before, we need to meet that threat. We are witnessing a coordinated surge in violent crimes across the country. Things are not taking place when it comes to gang-related homicides by accident. These things are coordinated. Kidnappings are being coordinated. There was a voice note circulating. It was all over the place. We had nothing to do with leaking it. But it tells a particular story. That too is authentic. I tried to suppress it because there were individuals mentioned who could have been identified and who were not yet in the possession of the security forces. Now, we've witnessed, of course, in the recent past, the assassination of a key person involved in the prosecution of serious crime. Others were targeted and other assassinations were planned. And they were all sparked by orders issued by their commanders within our prison walls. And that is characteristic of the threat that we face now. It is this: despite historic rivalries, members of gangs that would previously have nothing to do with each other are now, in some cases, united, in other cases, uniting to form a singular, coordinated method of attacking institutions of the state. The pattern we now face bears in that respect a haunting resemblance to the conditions that preceded the 1990 coup attempt. As observed then and reaffirmed now, these events are preceded by growing frustrations, ideological solidarity among violent actors, and decades-long critical lapses in responsiveness by the agencies of the state. Now, I did not say that those failings started 3 months ago. That's impossible. I'm speaking of decades-long inaction by the leadership of those on the other side. We will put a stop to that, Mr. Speaker. What differentiates today's threat from the national uprising in 1990 is in part the operational capacity of these gangs to collaborate across previously impenetrable rivalries and what should be the impenetrable barriers of a maximum security prison. In 1990, cell phones didn't exist, the internet did not exist, social media did not exist. We are dealing now with multiple forms of sophisticated and encrypted communications on a host of platforms, along with complex flows of money, arms, and equipment to these gangs from other international criminal organizations. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that the prison system has been compromised. That is not to say that every prison officer that we have is compromised or corrupted. There are many hard-working, courageous prison officers in the prison system. But the system has been compromised, and it has been serving inmates as a protected criminal command center. Mr. Speaker, prisoners are being tipped off about SIU raids by prison officers. As the prison officers come through the gates, as the SIU agents come through the gates, prison officers are shouting to some of these kingpins, X is coming. That is what is taking place in the prisons. They can maintain sophisticated communication with external affiliates, manage logistics, direct acts of violence through the use of smuggled phones, compromised officials, and exploitation of visitation in the absence of digital communications. Sadly, attorneys are sometimes involved. All of these things are enabled by corrupt officer-inmate collusion networks and growing black market economies operating within the prison walls. High-risk inmates in particular exploit the system through bribery. There's a lot of money taking place and passing hands in prison. Coercion, fear-mongering against those officers who resist involvement in illegal activities, and other forms of intimidation. The insidious influence erodes the professionalism of correctional staff and undermines our national ability to contain violent actors. Officers, visitors, and drones are used for smuggling and strategic coordination of contraband drops, reinforcing the sustainability of these criminal networks. Now, as I mentioned, drones, I have been cleared to see that the location that the problematic inmates were, that information that, I'm sorry, those locations that they were removed to were very recently also infiltrated by 2 drones. And that is what I've been permitted to say on that. The Defense Force, which has custody of those areas, have dealt with that situation. Now, I want to speak about the political will, because this is important. In the current scenario, because we are no longer dealing with a single entity, a singular uprising, or single acts, isolated acts of criminality, it may be prudent for us to consider whether we can confront the criminal ecosystem, which now has operational reach, ideological unity, and economic power, with the cooperation of those opposite under different leadership. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure this nation that whether they cooperate or not, we are determined to and we will eradicate this problem. I want to assure the members of the House, the population of Trinidad and Tobago, that our government understands the complexity of criminal infection. We have a comprehensive strategy to cauterize it. More importantly, we possess the political will to do it, and we are going to deal with this cancer head on. The Honorable Prime Minister has a team working with the Commissioner of Police on a coordinated and targeted approach to dealing with the criminal elements and this particular problem. And Mr. Speaker, the population can rest assured that there will be no partying with glasses at a time of crisis, and I heard someone say anymore. The point is that we're not talking about, we are talking about partying with glasses at the time you declare a state of emergency. We don't have anything against fun. We are not outlying fun. What we are saying is that when you have a state of emergency, when you make bold enough to declare a state of emergency, find yourself before the population of the country. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is on record as saying, and I quote, "I will not stand idly by for years, months, weeks, or even days while a minority of illegally armed individuals act in concert to intimidate the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I will not tolerate a resurgence of kidnappings for ransom and other heinous crimes initiated by gangs. I will not allow these elements of society to continue to terrorize and traumatize law-abiding citizens and to wreak havoc in our land." Mr. Speaker, I am proud to associate myself with those sentiments. And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Honorable members, I shall now pose the question for debate. Be it resolved that the proclamation made by the President on the 18th day of July 2025, declaring that a state of public emergency exists in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, be extended for a further period of 3 months. Port of Spain North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this motion, what we're before the House today to do is to listen to the government and its request for an extension of the state of emergency that has been declared for an additional period of 3 months.